Welcome to the AI argument. I'm here with Justin Collery. I'm Frank Prendergast, and we're going to argue about all of the AI news that's been catching our eye this week. And as always, there has been quite a lot of it. I don't know about you, Justin. I'm reaching that point again. It's only the end of January, and I'm already reaching that point in 2025 where I'm oversaturated with AI news, and my brain is starting to explode. What about you?
I've good news for you, Frank.
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't need to worry. You don't need to worry about it anymore. There's no need for an AI argument anymore. There's no arguments left to be had. It's done. Like, we will have AGI, if not by the end of this year, we will have it by the end of next year, guaranteed. And I can even explain to you how it will happen. But we'll get to that second.
Okay.
The first proof of the fact that we will have AGI this year or next year is Project Stargate. So let's just start with Project Stargate. If you want to see what's going on, follow the
We are going to visit ancient Egyptian civilizations through a portal, and they are going to give us AGI. Am I right?
No, but you're close.
Is Kurt Russell involved?
No, sorry.
Forget it. I'm not interested.
So they're going to spend $500 billion making data centers, nuclear power stations. Donald Trump said that he is going to personally sign any order that's needed in order to build a nuclear power station anywhere. To put it, I have to put some context on this number. 500 billion in today's money is the same as was spent on the Apollo moon mission back in the 60s. It's a lot of cash, ton of cash. If you want to know what's going on, follow the money. This is what's going on. It's a big, big deal. And I mean, this is the money side of it that I'm telling you. You can be sure that AGI will be achieved. And actually, if you remember, last week we talked about, there was a press release, remember, that it was this economic blueprint that OpenAI had released. And in that, they talked about that the benefits of AGI are as close as the jobs that will be created from all of the infrastructure. Yeah. I was there going, what does that mean? I mean, we couldn't figure it out. That's what they were talking about. They're already building these things. In fact, what's his face offered to bring Elon Musk down to visit one of his factories that was being built.
And this is kind of weird because newly inaugurated President Trump made a big announcement about this, and Project Stargate, new company, investment from a variety of big tech companies, and President Trump promising to basically get them going with executive orders that would basically remove all the barriers to getting this up and running, which in itself is you could say it's a good thing, you could say it's a slightly worrying thing.
What are you worried about? Because there is bits that I'm worried about.
Well, I'm worried about just removing all of the usual regulations that are required for a project of this magnitude, and what that means for, trivial things like the environment.
Well, you're in the right place if you're in Europe, Frank, because the rest of the world will be firing ahead with AGI, and you'll be stuck with your snails and your beautiful birds in the Stone Age pretty soon. I mean, it's like the founders going to America and wanting to set up camp and saying, "Oh, there's a beautiful snail there, better not." And look at everything that wouldn't have happened if they had decided to preserve the beautiful environment.
And look how alive we are. Look how alive we are, and these jobs that we have.
I'll tell you, I'm not as concerned about the environment, right? The environment is fine, right? It does take a big push like this to do it, right? It's fine, right? I'll tell you what I don't like, though.
Yes.
I don't like the fact that Oracle are involved. And in particular, I don't like the fact that Larry Ellison is involved.
Right. Tell me why.
Tell me more, I hear you say. So, why do you think, what was Oracle's first big deal? You're never going to know, right?
No, I'm not.
Oracle was founded as a company to make databases for 3-letter agencies, particularly the CIA and the FBI.
Right.
That was where they got their break. And you will remember, because we talked about it about 2 months ago or 3 months ago, that Larry Ellison said that AI will be a great way to keep manners on people that we should have cameras everywhere using AI to monitor everybody's movement. Now that I am not keen on at all. As I've discussed before, I've made a great deal of bad life choices, and if there was cameras everywhere watching me, I'm not up for that at all. But that's a really bad use of the technology. So I'm not keen on that, and I do hope there's some regulation to stop that part. But the first part to do with nuclear power stations.
I do enjoy how over the course of the AI argument, you have gone from like absolutely no regulation whatsoever to, well, you know what? I would like some regulation for the things that protect me personally.
Isn't that how all regulation works?
The other weird thing about Project Stargate is, I was when this hit the headlines, I was like, hang on, this sounds weirdly familiar. Didn't we talk about Project Stargate? And sure enough, we did. Prior to it being like a new company with all of these investments from all these different firms, it was announced originally as $100 billion data center with just OpenAI and Microsoft. So it seems like the whole thing has kind of gathered. It's like a snowball gathering snow as it's gone down the hill and pulled in more investment and pulled in more companies and now become this huge thing that the president is endorsing. So kind of interesting to see how it's developed that way as well.
It's been good. And of course, there's one person that's very unhappy with Project Stargate.
There is. I mean, talk about drama. Talk about it's like episodes of Gossip Girl. It's great.
We're of course talking about Elon Musk, who has his nose out of joint because after spending the last, 6 months doing everything he can to get Donald Trump elected as president, Donald Trump, as soon as he's in his office, signs a deal and says the government is going to support the one company that he really hates. In fact, Donald Trump even passed a comment about it, saying, yeah, look, he really doesn't like that guy. The one company he really hates, and Donald Trump is going to support them.
And I noticed that Donald Trump referred to Sam Altman as like being one of the greatest minds in AI or something. And I thought, oh, that's not going to go down well with Elon.
It's so funny. I was watching. I don't want to get this into a politics show, but it is kind of entertaining. I was watching the inauguration of Donald Trump, and it reminds me if it was a film and it was like the Avengers or something, and because you had all of these tech people, and you had Zuckerberg, eyeing up your man from Amazon's wife, and then you had Elon Musk. He was doing this weird thing with his neck. They all had weird tics. They were all oddballs in one particular way or another. It was like the Avengers, coming together, and it was just weird. It was very entertaining.
Yeah. And so, like so Sam Altman tweeted like recently, I think before Elon started giving out, I'm not 100% sure, but Sam Altman was tweeting about how he has changed his mind about Donald Trump, and that he basically said that he applied his own critical thinking to Trump's approach or policies or whatever, and that had made him change his mind, and apparently now he has a lot of respect for him. And I think he referred to something like he had fallen into the NPC trap, the non-player character, where he just, I guess, went along with a lot of negative sentiment towards Trump. But he was previously very vocal about the fact that he was not pro-Trump. And Elon Musk, in part of his raging against this Project Stargate, retweeted a really old tweet of Sam Altman's where he was congratulating Reid Hoffman, I think it was, for the work he had done in preventing Trump from being reelected in the previous election. So, I mean, talk about...
Did you see the other tweets? I love Twitter. Petty. Did you see the other tweets then where Elon Musk then came out and had this sort of press release, and he says, I'm going to let you into a secret. They don't have the money.
Yeah.
And then Sam Altman responds a really sort of passive aggressive put down, I really respect you. You're one of the greatest entrepreneurs, whatever. Just sort of killed him with kindness. And then he got a bit more spicy later. And then Satya came out, and it was so funny because Satya was then interviewed and he was asked about it. And he said, well, I'm good for my 80 billion. And Elon responded to that with, well, he's got the money, which actually made me laugh. He's got the 80 billion. It was like, oh yeah, he's got a lot of money, that guy. All right, now he's not. Yeah, he's not messing.
This this actually brings me on to something that you sent me a clip of Dario Amodei.
Yeah.
I think it was from Tavros. And mostly you were sending me the clip more to do with AGI, which we'll talk about in a second. But
Yeah.
he made another really interesting point. I thought, of course, I was going to think it was interesting because you and I made the same point.
Yes.
In episode 20 of the AI argument, when we were talking about the way that Sam Altman communicates. At the time, OpenAI were hyping Strawberry, and we were talking about how that weird kind of like conspiracy theory, tech bro communication style didn't really suit the gravity of what was involved with development of AI and AGI, and that you and I were just saying, we just found it very, very weird that a CEO would be communicating in this style. And I thought it was interesting that just recently Dario Amodei made the exact same point. Now, he didn't call out Sam Altman, he didn't call out OpenAI, but he said, like, we all know who he's talking about, because he said other companies, I won't name any names, but they have this style of communication where they're hinting at what's to come, and etc. And he made the exact same point, that it doesn't do justice to the gravity of what's coming down the line for society as we develop these systems, which, as well as giving you and I a nice little pat on the back for making a very good point, I think. It also brings us nicely into the whole question of AGI, and also, something that we end up talking about far too much on this program, which is the whole, let's call it, I hate using the term, but arms race with China, seeing as that's what it's been dubbed in the media.
It is an arms race. Okay, so let's talk about it, right? So it is an arms race. Okay, so let me give you the background first, right? So Davos was going on this week, and you've got to put all the bits together. As I said, I was kind of like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that episode where he's got all the red strings and whatever, and he's sort of trying to figure things out. So we've got 500 billion being invested. It's totally like the space race again, right? They are going to put America's going to put as much money and everything that's required in order to create AGI before everybody else. 500 billion tells you that it's real. They're spending a lot of money on it. That's the first thing. All the big players were in Davos this week, and they're all being asked about AGI. When do you think AGI is going to be achieved? Dario, in that same interview, said that he always thought that it would happen within the next 5 to 10 years, but over the last 3 to 4 months, he'd become even more certain that it was going to happen in the next 2 or maybe 3 years. Then one of the OpenAI guys was asked about it, and he said, "Look, I'm not even sure 2 years, could be sooner." Right, so they're obviously plowing ahead for it. And then Satya from Microsoft was asked about Project Stargate and the money, and he said, "Look, I'm certainly putting in 80 billion." He didn't explicitly say into Stargate, but he was investing 80 billion into AI, so, and infrastructure and so on. So what I want to explain to you is that you can take it as, this is why I'm saying, and it's very serious. It was interesting to hear Dario say, "Look, this is really serious. We need to start talking about it." The path to AGI is locked in. They know how to do it. So how you do it is this, right? What they discovered, the OR1 paper, is going to be as fundamental and as important as the Attention Is All You Need paper that was published back in 2017. So the OR1 paper takes us on the next step. And it's clearly similar to the thing that OpenAI developed back, maybe a year ago now, 9 months to a year ago, where you allow the models to think. So you give them a problem and you say, you have to think. Now, the interesting thing out of the paper was that you didn't have to instruct the model to think. It was an emergent property. Give it time and give it enough latitude to output tokens, it will just develop patterns of thinking all by itself. Now, in order to do that, you need a capable model to start with. So you need a GPT-4 in order to get it. If you used a previous model, it wouldn't work. You had to have this model, right? So then what you do is you give it lots of hard problems to do for that particular variety of model. And you give it all the time in the world to think as long as it can, right? To get to the right answers. So they have to be verifiable answers. Right? And you just keep doing that, right? You do it over and over and over and over again until it's learned basically what the right thinking patterns are. And that's your O1, right? That's your O1 model. But then what you do is you do a path of, they call it distillation. So then what happens is you take a model and you don't let it think, but you know what the right answers are, and you know what the thought patterns are, and you basically teach the smaller model to think like the bigger model. And you can do that. And that's what's called O1 mini in the OpenAI terms, right? And DeepSeek released a whole lot of models that they did this pattern on. And then what you do is you use that distilled model, so the small intelligent model, to start the whole process again. So you work on harder problems and you develop, thinking patterns that solve harder problems. And then when you've got that successfully done, you distill that. And then you find harder problems again and you give it time to think, and it will develop ways to solve those. And then you distill that. And so it's a repeatable pattern. So you get a big model distilled down to a small model. Think of hard problems, right? And you might need a bigger model to do it. And then you distill it down to a smaller model. Right? That's the kind of, in a very sort of layman terms, that's the kind of pattern. Now, DeepSeek, just to, on this program, we're very keen on looking on evidence, right? Not hype. And that's why we were getting annoyed at the sort of the way that Sam Altman was talking and these sort of obtuse tweets.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the models that they released was a 1.5 billion parameter model, DeepSeek did, after doing this process. And that model with 1.5 billion parameters was just as capable or similar, right? Very similar to Claude 3.5 and GPT-4o at maths and coding. So two things that are very verifiable, right? That's not an accident. But 1.5 billion parameters. So let me put that in context, right? Meta are about to release a model which they say will be the most capable in the world. It's 400 billion parameters. So this model, 1.5 billion parameters, that's as capable as one of the bigger ones, is tiny, right? 1/400th of the size. It's incredible. So, and I'll let you share your thoughts now in a second, but I will say this, right? It's clear, right, that DeepSeek will do exactly the same as what OpenAI did, and it'll take them about the same time. So 3 months, maybe 4 months, right? And they will have their next version of this thinking model. And you'll remember that OpenAI did the ARC AGI challenge, which is a challenge to, supposed to be an AGI test. And so long as they turned the compute up to the max, they got better than a human on that particular test. But they didn't win the challenge because you were only allowed to spend a certain amount of, I think it was $10,000 a question or something like that, right, in solving it. DeepSeek costs pennies, costs less than 5% of the OpenAI model. They will win the ARC AGI challenge. They absolutely will. Now, let me I do need to talk as well about the politics of it then, right? Because you're saying it's an arms race. This is an arms race, right? Absolutely it is. It's total balls by China to not just to release the model, but to release it as open source and to release the paper, right? So remember, I mean, we've talked about this before, right? You remember that people, Russia and America didn't put a man on the moon, right, to benefit science and humanity, right? And, maybe to help a couple of snails and good for the environment and all that sort of stuff. They put a man on the moon because they were demonstrating that if I can fire a rocket 250,000 miles in that direction and land it on a pinprick, I can absolutely fire it 10,000 miles in the other direction and land it right on top of your head, right? And it's going to be a nuke. That was why the space race was important. Why this is important, the DeepSeek one is, it's the Chinese saying, we can do what you can do. Not only that, but we can do it for 10% of the money. You've just spent 500 billion. We can do it for 50 billion. And here's the technical paper to prove it. And this is what we're showing you. We got loads of better stuff in the back. We can do better than you can. It's politics as well as economics, as well as academics. It's all coming together. And so you can be guaranteed that the Americans are going to go hell for leather for AGI. You got 4 or 5 companies going for it, as well as the Chinese, because whoever wins it, potentially will be dominant for who knows how long into the future. It will be that paper, the DeepSeek paper, will be one of the most fundamental papers. And this week, I think in years to come will be, in fact, this whole Christmas, right, the 12 days of Christmas and then this afterwards will be seen as one of the most consequential months in time. When they write the history books, this month will be a very important month. So there you go, Frank. It's back 2 years and it'll be done. I can tell, and in 2 years, the timeline will be, you're going to get your O3 in about a week. That's the O3 mini. You're going to get your O3 full sometime around May. You're going to get your O4 sometime towards the end of next year. You're going to get your O5, maybe March the following year, and O6. And who knows, any one of those, we're going to be arguing about, oh, it's not AGI because it doesn't pet my cat correctly. Or there'll be some sort of weird case that it doesn't do. And you can say, well, sure, a human can do that. A 5-year-old can do that. But it will be superhuman at, everything else. And I mean, we were talking about it, and okay, so you can speak to this as well. But I think that we will all have our Lee Sedol. This will enter the lexicon. When did you have your Lee Sedol moment? So that was Lee Sedol was the AlphaGo player that was beaten by an AI, and he was traumatized by it for a while, and then he got over it. But it was mind blowing to him that a computer could beat him. And I think we'll all have that sensation, and many of us will have it over the next 2 years.
And yeah, and possibly have it over the next couple of years, possibly have it multiple times. I feel that's certainly the way I feel anyway. I feel like I had a Lee Sedol moment when the whole generative AI revolution, if you want to call it that, started. And I feel like I'm going through it again now with the potential advent of AGI. And we will probably go through it again with the potential advent of ASI. But if anyone hasn't seen AlphaGo, I'm pretty sure it's available to watch on YouTube. And it's an incredible watch. And yeah, I think you're right. I think Lee Sedol's experience is a microcosm for what all of humanity is going to go through, because he starts out believing there is absolutely no way that an AI system can beat him at the game Go. He's the world champion, and he just absolutely believes there's no way an AI is going to be able to do it. And then he begins to realize, hang on, this AI is pretty good, and he starts to get a little bit concerned. And then there is that moment when the AI makes a move that everybody thinks is insane and that it must have been a mistake, and turns out to have been a move of absolute genius, and that completely changes his perspective. What I think is, hopeful about the movie is that it doesn't end with Lee Sedol quitting the game Go and walking away in despair, and he ends up. And I know major spoiler alerts here, but I do think it's worth talking about, because he ends up in a place where he's like, well, this has been a fascinating learning experience, and there's a lot I can learn from the way that the AI program played, and he continued to play. I hope that humanity continues to play. I hope that there's a lot we can learn from these AI systems and working with them, and that we continue to play. But you sent me a tweet from Ethan Mollick, who we often mention on this show.
Yep.
And the bottom line is, as a society, as a species, like we are not ready for what's coming. We talk a lot again on the AI argument about Leopold Aschenbrenner and his essays on situational awareness. Well, we are not situationally aware. And I'll be honest, I find it quite exhausting trying to, from a position of not being situationally aware, trying to figure out, what does AGI mean? How should we be defining AGI, and what are the impacts that it's going to have on society? And Ethan Mollick tweeted asking people, like, what is your vision? What's your vision for what happens when we achieve AGI? And he said, interestingly, it caught my eye immediately, because he followed it up with UBI is not an answer. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Is he saying UBI is not the way forward? But what he meant was, UBI is not an answer, in that UBI is a mechanic that might make sure that we have an income, but it's not a vision for how we actually live our lives. Like, even if we say UBI is a necessary mechanic, what impact does it actually have on society? And we've talked about this before, about how there's a lot of people whose very being is tied up in how they make a living. And if you take that away, regardless of whether you give them endless amounts of money, it's philosophically devastating, potentially.
Yeah. And I'll give you, I think it's in a way it's good, and that's why Dario was saying we need to talk about this more seriously, because people who are in charge, the Overton window of governments and influencers, people who can actually influence people, needs to start talking about this, because it will happen in the next 2 years. It's not something that's going to happen. Before we would have talked about it. It's fun to talk about if it's like it'll happen in 5 years or 10 years. It's kind of over the next hill that you're never going to get to. It's not over the next hill that you're never going to get to. It's going to happen very, very soon. And I'll give you a practical example, right? But this needs to happen on a bigger scale, but just how it can mess with your head. So I'm buying a house at the moment, and it doesn't have solar panels on it. And I was thinking, God, I wonder would I put solar panels on the house now, blah, blah. I'm thinking, why would I bother? There's going to be Microsoft released a model recently that can create materials. It's going to happen. Probably in 3 or 4 years, solar panels are going to be way more efficient than they are today. It will be a total waste of money to go and put solar panels. I think, I might be wrong. I'm not going to lose a whole lot. That's the other part of the equation, right? What do I lose by not putting the solar panels? Not a great deal, right? But what do I lose by moving too early? Loads. And you get into this sort of weird, if a lot of people think about it too deeply, you get into this sort of weird economic place where it's like, the best thing I can do is actually nothing. I'm just going to sit around and wait for this thing to wash over, because everything's going to be better on the other side. And that would create a sort of an economic collapse if everybody was to think that way.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of weird stuff that can happen.
Yeah, and I totally get that, because I'm a marketer, and recently I've been looking at our offerings and how we might change them and what we might package up as offerings. And it's very difficult, because a lot of those offerings, I'm like, well, AI is going to do that. AI is going to do that. AI is going to do that. But, but it's not doing them right now. But still, I'm like, does it make sense to invest in this offering and put all that time and effort into selling this to clients, only to have AI take over it in, X amount of months, or, so yeah, I totally get that. And at a macrocosmic level, that could have a serious impact.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Another guy that had a Lee Sedol moment, by the way, this week was Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader.
Yes. One of my
Taxi
Driver is my favorite film of all time, and it's written by Paul Schrader.
Yeah.
So
Paul Schrader started using O1, the model O1, and he tweeted out, he said, I've just come to realize AI is smarter than I am. It has better ideas and is more efficient at ways to execute them. And then he was asked, well, how did you come to this conclusion? And he said, I started asking it for ideas in the style of Paul Schrader, and they were better than my own ideas.
Yeah.
And that for him was his Lee Sedol moment. It's like, wow, this thing's better than I am. So, in fact, it brings me back to the bet that we have. I don't know how much we put on it. It was a lot of money, if I remember correctly. And one of the things was, will they write an award-winning screenplay before the end of, was it 2027? The end of 2027?
But this is, this is what's kind of interesting for where we are right now, because I would totally buy that it's possible that O1 might come up with ideas for scripts. But right now, it's not. Right now, there's no AI that I'm aware of that could write a script to the level of Paul Schrader. Maybe, not without Paul Schrader's heavy input, shall we say. So right now, is it possible that, that AI could help Paul Schrader to write a better screenplay or come up with a better idea? Yes. But that's the question, isn't it? Is that like, when will it actually be able to just write a script that is genuinely better than a Paul Schrader script?
Well, a good comment from Ethan Mollock this week as well, I liked this one, was companies who are looking at AI should aim for where the puck is going rather than where the puck is right now. Which is, try and it's not going to slow down, it's going to speed up. So try to aim for where you think it's going to be, 6 months from now or whatever. But look, for me, the big takeaway of the last week is this is real. Like, it isn't just a fun thing to talk about and, chat about it and think, no, this is going to happen. It's absolutely real, and it's going to happen very soon. And the path to, and actually Ilya went off and said he's going to do a straight shot to ASI. It's obvious now. He saw this. He knows the technology better than anybody. He knows that he doesn't need billions and billions. If you just give him enough time and enough, kind of like the guys in China, enough compute, he will do it in one shot, and he doesn't need to release products to do it. That's what he saw.
Yeah, because if he had left OpenAI and started up a company to develop AGI, his company would be almost obsolete already. So yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? We were all, certainly
Yeah.
we talked about it was like, well, it's a very risky strategy to have a company that's not going to release any products and then go, bing, there's your ASI. You go, how do you do that? The DeepSeek paper shows you exactly how you do it and shows you that you don't need to release products in order to get there. You just need time. You need the time to allow the models to think, and then you just go through that process of thinking, distillation, thinking, distillation, thinking, distillation. And if you do that enough times, you will get ASI.
So just as we finish, it's there's it's a lot of food for thought. As I said at the start, my brain is starting to explode already, or melt, or it's it's a lot to take in, it's a lot to think about, and as a society we're actually not doing enough thinking about it. And I would be slightly concerned that at a government level, all of the thinking is about how do we get there, not what do we do when we get there, and how do we look after our citizens. However,
what are the Europeans doing, Frank?
Huh?
What are the Europeans doing?
Well, at least
I'm not asking that in a jokey way at all.
No, I know.
You have the Americans spending $500 billion and saying we'll build a nuclear power station on an ancient Indian burial ground if we have to, right? We're going to get this thing done. And you've got the Chinese saying, here, this thing is so easy. We're publishing the papers for free. We could do this for fun. And what are the Europeans doing? Because we're going to have
are talking about how it's actually going to affect the world and how do we minimize its negative impacts, which I think is, very important work. And I wish everyone else was doing it at least in tandem with what they are building.
They're fiddling while Rome burns. I'm serious. I'm not even joking. Like, Europe needs to get its. Europe can do this, right? We have Airbus. We had the Ariane program. We had, when Europe gets behind a big idea, Europe can execute on a big idea. But at the moment, they're picking around the edges and they're regulating themselves in consequence.
But look, we've talked about this before. We never had the massive tech companies that America had. But we do have Mistral in France, who are very successful, and their models are being used for their models are very, very well respected. And so we do have some companies. We never had the same scale of companies that the US did. So I don't believe that the regulation that the EU is doing is stifling us. Mistral are still in France. I certainly haven't seen or heard any indication that they are thinking of moving as a result of the regulations. So I think actually this is a good example that that you can and should think about both simultaneously.
We need to crank it up. Actually, if you go listen to, I've said this before, go and listen to any of the talks by OpenAI. 9 out of 10 of those voices will not be American accents. And many of the ones that aren't are European accents. We need to find homes for those people in Europe so that they can apply their skills here. And it's a matter of national importance at this stage. In 2 years, you can imagine that in 2 years, China and America will have the equivalent of the 21st century nuclear bomb, and Europe will not. We need to get the finger out and get started.
Or they need to get the finger out and start regulating, because we don't, the world doesn't necessarily need two massive superpowers with the equivalent of the nuclear, worse, like potentially far worse than nuclear arms. And if we, if they don't regulate, and if we don't put some global agreements in place about what's acceptable and what isn't, we are in serious trouble.
They're not going to regulate. They're just not. It's not. I mean, Donald Trump has just said, he's like, I'll sign any order that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the argument is that they absolutely should. I'm not saying that it's realistic to expect that that President Trump will change his mind on regulation, but I'm just defending the EU's position. I think it's vitally important, and I think things like how it impacts on society and what we do are all things that slowly begin to take shape and slowly begin to be discussed around regulation and around the conversations that happen at that level. But
anyway, look at one company. Interesting. Let's just go. I know, right? Culturally, is very important as well. I think we should get the French. Tell the French that we want to make kind of like Mixtral, right? Tell them, look at, if you want to preserve French and the French culture, we need to going to have an AGI, French one, AGI. They should have some French name for it. Le AGI, and they'll get out. The French are very good at brilliant engineers. The French, very good at that sort of thing. Anyway, one company, you were saying that you were worried about putting some time and effort into some AI or into some marketing because AI was going to do this work instead in the future. One company not worried about that is Samsung.
Yeah,
tell us more.
Well, so this is the mad thing, isn't it? That like all of this AGI potentially around the corner, but then in the meantime, we also have all of this like continuing AI hype and products coming out that are hyping up AI and hyping up what AI can do and being completely unrealistic about what it can actually achieve. And I just happened to read one report that I just thought was amusing about CES. And I think let me find the actual headline. CES was a giant exercise in AI gaslighting. That was the headline. And basically they were saying, as an example of what they were talking about, there's always apparently a lot of excitement about what Samsung are going to show in terms of their displays. And they were, the journalist was saying that they've had displays that are flexible and displays you can fold and paper-like displays. And there's been all kinds of, fascinating stuff with previous CESs from the Samsung stand. And Samsung said in advance that their focus would be on AI. And he said that AI and OLED displays was like Penn and Teller or peanut butter and jelly. And so people got very excited for what this meant and how AI was going to impact on Samsung displays. And then they got to the booth and it had absolutely nothing to do with AI whatsoever.
No.
They basically just showed like new displays that had the usual kind of advances in brightness and durability and flexibility. But basically their peanut butter and jelly tie to AI was basically that AI generated content would look great on these screens.
They're not alone. They're not alone. I was in Harvey Norman during the week also looking for something for the new house, and everything is AI powered. There was a sweeping brush that was AI powered. You have a toothbrush which is AI powered. Everything our tasks soon are going to be AI powered.
And Justin, the worst thing about it is that toothbrush that I have, it's a great toothbrush, but the AI features, they don't work.
Frank, it's been a pleasure as always. Before we go, I do want everybody to think a little bit about just that model, right? The 1.5 billion parameter model. You could fit that on a phone, right? And the Chinese have shown us how to do it. So just think about how the engineers in Meta are feeling right now. Think about how the engineers in Apple are feeling right now. Think about how OpenAI and X are feeling, because they would all be crawling over that paper. And some of them will be delighted, and some of them will be crying into their beer on a Friday evening. Frank, been a pleasure as always.
100%. Justin, see you next week for who knows what. Who knows what will have been announced by then. And I look forward to hearing your views on it. Talk to you then.
Cool. Likewise. Talk to you.